Hello and welcome to this episode of Demystified as we explore home cooking in a modern world. Hello, I'm Linda and I'm here with my friend Paul. Hey Paul.
Good morning, Linda.
How are you today?
Yeah, it's a Monday morning.
It is a Monday morning today, and most times we try to do them on Monday. Paul, I've been thinking over the weekend I know
dangerous.
It could be a bad start to our conversation, but given that we are in the process of getting our combi steam oven fixed, and it's still with the repairman, so that's okay. It's been there now for one whole day, and we're still missing it. And we could be out looking for another combi steam oven. And as you know, I'm going to get two. But over the time cooking with steam's been going, and even before that, we went to demos. You've conducted a lot of demos, and you and I have been to a couple. And you've seen a lot of people who are in their journey for cooking, whether it be combi steam ovens or whether it just be they want to buy an oven or they don't know about induction. And I'm sure you've got a huge insight into
insight or opinions.
Yeah, well, maybe more opinions, but you've seen a lot of people, sit across the bench from you, and they're there for a reason, and they're looking for help, they're looking for instruction, or sometimes I'm sure they're looking for a free lunch, but most times they're there looking for some information about something, about the new technology or how this all works. Yeah. Because by and large, when people replace a major appliance, and while it's not the biggest expense in our house, it's certainly one that you don't spend that money all the time. It's not like, you get into the habit of buying an oven.
No.
So it's 10 years, 15 years, sometimes 20 years between, searching for a product, and the market changes so quickly.
Yeah. Certainly does.
So they really do need a lot of help. So what are you finding, like in a typical demo, what are you trying to get across, or what do you think that the people are there for?
Well, I think you're right. People are there, obviously, to understand what's changed since the last time they purchased. So you get there's a variety of customers, I suppose. You have your customers that have bought let's say an older house and have got older appliances in there, and they're doing a reno. You're getting people that are doing a new build. They're getting people like yourself that have within the last 10 years had an appliance and maybe they're not happy with it and will go for a replacement. So the thing about them is that cooking demonstrations do play an important part, but it's really up to the client or the customer how much they get out of them. So anyone that's going to a demo, I'd say go prepared, and when I say prepared, go prepared with like some questions that you want answered. Part of the beauty of a cooking demonstration generally, and I mean I've done big crowd cooking demonstrations which are a little bit more difficult. But the smaller crowd, the 6 to 8 people, they're good because you can have one-on-one interaction. And what most people want is answers to their specific cooking queries and questions. So people will come in with their own cookware at times. Will this work on induction? They bring their pot in. In the case of demonstrating a downdraft, they bring in a tall pot and go, does this work? Will my oven tray fit in this particular oven that you're showing me today?
An oven tray?
Yeah, it happens often. So, okay. People have got their favourite bits of cookware. And so, now, while that's only one example, it's, but come prepared. Like, in the case of combi steam, it's a little bit different because a lot of people still don't know. Okay, so it's still quite new and they're like, what is this thing? And generally, they've been suggested to go to a demo by whoever the sales consultant is looking after them, so they can have a look and see. Because a lot of people will still walk in and go, okay, I want an oven. and maybe have never heard of it. Like, you didn't know. Well, I mean, you sort of... you sort of...
No, I'd done some research, but...
But you still didn't know the ins and outs of it. So Combi Steam is a little bit different because you'll quite often get customers that have just walked in and go, no, I just want to get a regular oven, and then they come to a Combi Steam demo or a demo that has a Combi Steam oven, and maybe you sort of open up their eyes a bit to see the possibilities. They're not... Well, they shouldn't be a hard sell. They should just be showing what is possible with those particular appliances. And quite often what a demo is, once you get through the ins and outs of the appliance, quite often what a demo becomes is a bit of a cooking lesson. Be it right or wrong, people have a desire to understand technique, which is why I'm kind of technique driven, because they're the bits that people ask me more questions about than anything else. They kind of the demo goes in a bit of a wave. It's a bit funny. You get the initial sort of, when people arrive, they sit down and they they listen and they ask quite specific questions about how this bit of technology works, or what's the effect of having a touch screen, and, is that going to, break down versus having a, old style oven with a knob, and you get those bits, and then you get into the cooking part of it, and that's where why are you doing it like this? Why are you doing it like that? The food technique questions come into it, and then at the end, you'll generally come back to maybe the technology or something like that, and that's where you can get to people a little bit more one-on-one. So you'll be able to take them to an oven, to a cooktop, and run them through the individual functionality that they want to know about. It's different every time. But the worst, and for anyone going to a cooking demonstration, just the worst ones from a demonstrator's perspective, and I can tell you, and I've only had maybe, I can count them on one hand, you get the ones when no one asks anything. And so you're there for 2 hours and you're getting nothing back from the crowd, and it's incredibly difficult. So if you see a cooking demonstrator sort of drowning like that, just throw them a bone.
Ask a question.
Ask a question.
How are you going?
Yeah. And what they do is they generally will go off, I don't script mine, and they go off in tangents depending on the questions that people ask. And if someone asks a question, what you might often find is someone else will have a similar sort of question, and they go off in all sorts of tangents, particularly around, cooking styles, ingredients, like everything. So there's not a tried and true sort of, I don't think there should be a tried and true scripted demonstration. It's very much customer driven. So go prepared and with what you want answered. And the skill of the demonstrator is to actually listen to your question. Anyone that doesn't answer your question directly, like if they spear off into something that you didn't really ask, that's when you need to sort of perk up and go, no, that's not what I was asking. Be reasonably direct, because like you say, this isn't a small amount of money, generally. And especially if you're doing an entire kitchen package, like you're talking fridge, cooktop, range hood, ovens, maybe 1, 2, who knows, like there's wine fridge, all sorts of stuff. And just remember that the demonstrator, a good demonstrator will have product knowledge outside of cooking appliances, but not depth. So if you ask a demonstrator about a dishwasher, as an example, they should know the basic ins and outs of the brand that they're working for. They won't have the depth of knowledge that they would have on cooking, but they should have a few of the basic ins and outs and be able to tell you a little bit about those pieces. So, it's a funny environment, but yeah, the piece of advice I can give to people is certainly when you're, let's say, going from gas to induction, or when you're going from regular oven to Combi Steam, or even pyrolytic for that matter, and you're getting into touchscreen ovens and, Wi-Fi apps and all this sort of stuff, it's worthwhile going. And they're generally, globally, they're free. So...
And they go for about an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Yeah, it depends. Different brands do different lengths of time. I kind of try and get mine done in an hour and a half and then leave half an hour at the end for people to come up and go through individual stuff, because quite often you're sitting at a bit of a distance from where, and especially nowadays, from where, so people might not be able to see as clearly, and they want to touch the screen, and it's all well and good demonstrating it, but get up, touch and feel and play with them, because unless you're comfortable with it, you're generally not going to get involved.
What sort of food? When I know that we've been to, a few, and I've seen a few independently, the food that you want to present at a food demo, what do you show? Because you've only got an hour and a half to show people really a range of appliances, how to use an induction or how to get the best out of this or that.
Yeah.
So what would be typically a kind of,
well, all brands do it differently depending on what they want to focus on. So a lot of brands that demonstrate Combi Steam will focus on the combination side of things and not so much the standalone steam side of things, which is where I think maybe they miss out a little bit. And maybe that's just a lack of understanding, but this is my opinion. The food, so the way I do it is I look at what appliances I might have on hand at a particular location, because they quite often vary. So one place that you might, like a retailer that you might do a demo, might only have a couple of ovens. So the brand you're representing, they might only have a couple of ovens there. And then another retailer might have 2 ovens, cooktop, range hood, fridge. So it depends. The way I work it is, and when I'm trying to figure out what to cook, depends on what appliances I have on hand. So I don't just go in with, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. There is a basis to it, but generally the appliances I have on hand dictate what I cook. And what I try and do is pack in as much as possible into that hour and a half or 2 hours. So I don't want to just show a Combi Steam oven steaming vegetables at 100 degrees. While I will do that as part of it, that doesn't tell the story to me. I want to show as many different functions of the appliance in a short time frame as I possibly can. So I'll use vegetables, I'll do a dessert at a different temperature, I'll do maybe some sous vide, I'll do whatever I can manage efficiently in a 2 hour time period. That's what I kind of go for. A lot of brands go for the big, super duper feast and stuff, whereas I'm more of a, let's just have a little taster, so everything's quite small. We're talking sort of 60, 80 gram portions of things, because you are time limited, and no one really is going to sit there and watch a roast chicken, in an oven. No. So you got to get stuff in and out. The other thing with me when I do my demonstrations, I'm very keen on showing from raw to finished in front of the customer. So I don't want to have pre-prepared, pre-cooked stuff. Everything has to start from raw like you would at home. I'm trying to mimic what happens at home. Now, although it might be smaller, and because it's smaller it will generally cook a little bit faster, it gives you an accurate indication of a raw piece of fish to a cooked piece of fish in 15 minutes, and then you can pile in other dishes and things on top. The idea being is that you show, I think, as many different functions of the appliance in a 2 hour demonstration as possible. So the food, while important, I kind of look at the food as a tool to show the appliance. a lot of people get caught up in the food competition side of thing and start talking to you about MasterChef and Gordon Ramsay and all the rest of it. It's not a realistic sort of thing to be thinking about in a cooking demonstration.
No.
Like if we want to spend 2 hours on creating a single dish, yes, we could do that, and it'll be something probably that someone at home's not going to cook, and explaining multiple techniques, and it doesn't really show the appliance off.
And that's a cooking lesson, not a cooking demonstration.
So I kind of use the food as a bit of a tool, and it's generally pretty simple stuff. What I go for is like premium ingredients, but prepare them very simply. So it's not dictating to people how they cook at home or how they should cook, or what flavours they should use. It's just very straightforward. It's certainly not bland cooking, but it's, just take a really good ingredient and cook it correctly and show how the appliance can cook that ingredient correctly. That's my theory on it.
So if you are really interested in maybe 2 appliances, maybe an oven and a cooktop, you should make sure that demonstration is going to be able to do it. If you're going for a brand, if you have it, set on a particular brand.
And what you have to understand is that depending on where you are, like Australia's, as far as cooking demonstrations, a pretty prominent part of the journey. I know in the States there's not many. Like certainly particular brand showrooms will have them, so that's where you can access, all of the appliances. But don't be put off by, okay, you go to X store and they've got products which they can cook in and demonstrate, but they might not have the cooktop that you particularly want. That demonstrator should be able to, somewhere in the store, show you that cooktop and run you through the functionality of it and how it works. The limitation with having everything plugged in is generally power. So there's only a certain amount of power, like electricity going into the store. Quite often you can't have gas, like mains gas. You certainly can't have LPG piped into the store. So, but a lot of things like induction cooktops will be in what's called a demo mode. So they can show you the functionality. You can switch it on, it just won't heat. So you can see it light up, how it actually works, but it just doesn't heat. And it's very similar with ovens. Any brand that doesn't have their stuff plugged in for you to actually turn on. Now, when I say turn on, it's not going to heat, but at least turn on so you can see the interface,
you can see how it lights
up, all the rest of it. You need to be going somewhere else. But most these days should be able to. I often have this conversation with people that I work with that, in my opinion, and I've done, I don't know how many demonstrations now, but the only way that combi steam sells is if you can demonstrate it, because it's just a theory in people's, and explaining that theory, it's just an idea in people's heads. You have to actually show them for this appliance to sell. And that's from a brand perspective.
But the same would be for induction, and particularly with a product with a downdraft.
Yeah, so all downdrafts.
Until you see that downdraft, and we've seen a few that range from to fantastic, and you can really tell. But unless you see that, you just have no idea.
Yeah, and they're the ones, like, you look at the the videos online and do a bit of research. Although they give you an idea, nothing compares to a downdraft is probably the best example. Nothing compares to seeing it in real life and whether it actually does what the video portrays that it does.
Yeah,
because that's a real visual thing. But from an oven perspective, like every single marketing image that you see for every manufacturer with an oven will have beautiful golden brown, multi-level cooking that does it all, right?
Yeah.
I still think the best way to know if it's going to work is to actually see someone cooking it. And mind you, don't worry, the mistakes happen. So, like, demonstrators mess up. No one's perfect, and cooking isn't perfect. But the question is the demonstrator good enough to sort of hide it a little
Well,
bit.
you and I have both been to one where lovely person behind the demonstration, lovely person, and a
this
really
was a
quality brand,
uber premium brand,
and
it was pretty average.
There was one lady sitting on our side of the bench wearing a diamond that I thought had its own postcode. It was so big.
Yeah, she was dripping in diamonds.
And the lady that was preparing food was just not on top of the burnt bread.
Yeah.
The oily. No, it was terrible. She just missed the mark completely.
Yeah, and don't just
which was a shame because it was a great brand and she was obviously a well-liked, well-known person to that brand. But wow, from a cooking demo point of view. One of the things in the very early days when you were demonstrating with a downdraft company, you used to have a technician would be there, someone who really knew the product technically, and you would demonstrate it from a cooking point of view. And so I always thought there was an interesting selling point that, and you don't see it when you go to cooking demonstrations, which are really appliance demonstrations.
Yeah.
You don't see them when you go to the big retailers, that a salesperson isn't often there because you know the product, you might know the brand really well, but that salesperson has sitting in front of them potential customers who want to buy, who are looking to get some help then on the actual product, the price, the deal, and there's no one around. And so if you've got questions about design, will it fit, specifications, you can't answer that, can you?
Well, I kind of, for me, so traditionally when I started working for that downdraft company, there was a rep there who knew and fortunately this rep was a actual kitchen designer previously. So he had a pretty clear understanding of how everything fit, added to which he was German, so he was really like spot on to the millimetre about knowing that sort of stuff. Yeah. But what was funny is over time, he actually didn't involve himself as much as I learnt the product. So as I listened to him, I learnt how he was communicating that stuff, and I would take that on as part of my presentation, if you like. And it was the same when I started working for another brand, which was more ovens and cooktops and that sort of stuff. Initially, yes, I'd have a sales rep there, and eventually it wasn't necessary because I knew the specs, the ins and outs, the amperage required for an induction cooktop. So a good demonstrator, in my opinion, knows that stuff and doesn't need to have a salesperson there. There is generally in that scenario, and we're talking more specifically in Australia, in that scenario, you're hosting these demonstrations in a retail outlet, and there's about 10 salespeople in there. Now, it's those salespeople, in my opinion, that should be coming over at the conclusion of the demonstration and helping people. Whether there needs to be a brand salesperson there, it's arguable. I think initially someone new to the company that maybe hasn't had the training and is hired as a cook or a demonstrator for the company, then yes. But I think over time it should be part of their job to understand, a few of those specifications. I never talk price, ever. So throughout however many years I've been doing this, price was something that I never discussed with customers.
Did you get asked it?
Yep, all the time.
Okay.
And I didn't discuss it because there was quite often different promotions going on and it might be cheaper, and I didn't see that as my role. As soon as you start discussing price, you become a salesperson, and I think it dilutes what you're there to do, which is demonstrate the product. So I'm pretty fervent on not knowing the price, although I know it. I kind of go, nah, not my job. You want to know the price? Talk to a salesperson. I didn't know how to process orders at all. I didn't know any of those bits because you still want to leave it to, a salesperson to secure the deal. Your job, from a demonstrator's perspective, is just to show the appliance in its best light. You're not there to be a hard sell on people. Your job is to show the appliance. And if you do a good enough job, the people will buy. But it's only if you do a good enough job. It doesn't secure the sale, but it doesn't not help secure a sale. It's just a part of a bigger picture. And brands do it because it is important. Like, there's no doubt it is important. And if you do it well, I have quite a lot of data to back up. If you do it well, you can get some success out of it. And for the brand that you might be working for, it's can help increase sales, especially with people that are looking. Very rarely you're going to get a demonstration for a $500 oven.
No.
Okay, so it's generally you're talking in the thousands. So you're getting those customers that are willing to spend a bit more. Generally, the customers attending a demonstration, much like yourself, are pretty keen home cooks that maybe want to improve end results. I've said it before, I'm not in the business of changing the way people cook. I'm in the business of showing people how to improve their end result. And if I can show them through A, technique, and B, through an appliance, my job's done.
Well, I think that's what I've learned over the time anyway. But in terms of taking along your plans, if you've got a full reno or an amended kitchen, or even just the dimensions you're trying to fit an oven in, at what point do you reckon you should take in your plans or your idea? At the actual, okay, we've sorted it out now we're going to get specific. Talk to a salesperson, because while you know the price, you don't know the final price that they're going to get paid or get charged, because there's deals, there's discounts,
there's all sorts of
there's
stuff.
all sorts of stuff that go into affecting the price.
Yeah.
But at what point do you really get serious, take in all that stuff?
Well, it depends. If you're doing your own design, and basically building the kitchen yourself, that's totally up to you. If you're working with a designer or an architect or someone like that, they'll tell you at what point they need specs, and then they'll draw in the specs of the appliances that you're considering. It's got to be said that most now, if I just for a second put North America aside, globally, except for I think Switzerland, so Switzerland and North America, we'll just park for a second, most wall ovens, so I'm not talking freestanding ranges, but most wall ovens are 60 centimetres wide, 24 inches, across all brands. Like, it's almost a standard size. The height of the oven will differ, and you'll get 60, or you'll get 60 by 45, or you'll get 15 centimetre vacuum drawers by 60. So most are very similar from a size perspective. But to answer your question, when do you go in? Your kitchen designer or architect will tell you, okay, I need some specs about... And the only thing that will change within those specs, especially if we're talking wall ovens, is cutout for your cooktop. And different brands will do different things as far as the cutout dimensions that they need. So we've recently been looking at yours.
Yep.
So a brand that I used to work for had a 75 centimetre gas cooktop. So if you were, and a lot of people in older houses will have a 60 centimetre gas cooktop. Now, the benefit of that 75 centimetre gas cooktop was you didn't have to change your cutout. It fit into a 60. So you got more cooktop, but it fit into a 60 cutout. So it was really good design. But induction changes things. Do you want it flush mounted? All that sort of stuff. So when do you take it in? When you're told, or straight up front when you're shopping. But understand that most built-in appliances will be of similar dimensions globally. I know Switzerland have their own size. It's 55 centimetres for some unknown reason. And our friends in America and North America will be bigger. But the funny thing about a lot of those appliances, they're bigger in width, but the cavity itself will be the same. It's bizarre.
That is bizarre.
Yeah.
So I know that...
so your little oven at home, right, is a 45 centimetre high by 60 centimetre wide combi steam oven. What I can tell you is that same oven will come in a 90 centimetre wide oven, and you open the door, but the cavity is identical to yours.
That really does make sense.
Yeah. And then you have freestanding.
Well, other than it just visually bigger might look better or more prestigious, but the cavity's the same.
Yeah. And then freestanding ranges are, again, a bit different. So that's where you've got your oven and your cooktop in a freestanding unit. And again, to a degree, they're very similar in size across most major manufacturers. You'll get 90 centimetre, 120 centimetre, so 30... I'm not so good with the inches. 36 inch, 32 inch, I can't remember. 36 and 48. Like, they get pretty big. But the sizes are pretty generic. Pretty generic across all brands. So from your Gaggenauers, Miele's, like all of them, they're built-in stuff. Although it will have a different appearance, the actual cutout size will be almost identical. And that's why when you go cabinetry shopping, and let's say you're doing built-in wall ovens, the cabinetry will be 60 centimetres wide because it's a global thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't be too caught up. Probably cooktops a little bit more important. Maybe not important, but the cutout for your cooktop, if you're doing stone and stuff like that, you need to know a cooktop cutout if you're getting stone cut, because that's an expensive process.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and if you depending on what surface material, I know if you use materials like Decton, which is a really high quality, and I'm not promoting brands here, but I've used cooktops on Decton and had them flush mounted, so that's where the cooktop sits perfectly flat with the induction. That can then become, to the millimetre. You need a CNC machine to cut it. That's where you need to have some accurate specs. But generally, you send your kitchen designer the models and everything is online. And a good manufacturer will have specs for designers, architects, whoever it is, and they just look them up, draw them in, happy days, done. It's not as difficult as what people think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah,
it's
kind of got off tangent about the cooking demo thing.
No, but it is interesting because it's not just one facet. Yeah. When you're looking at spending money in your kitchen, you've got a lot of things to really think about.
And a lot of people will walk in, and a lot of demonstration kitchens will have, let's say, a 60 centimetre and a 45 centimetre oven on display. So you've got a bit of a tower there. And then they're like, well, okay, I really didn't want a tower, I want it side by side, so you want a bank of ovens. But if you have a 45 and a 60 next to each other, you've got a 15 centimetre gap. So how's that going to look? And then you can look at options like warming drawers. So there's, kind of think of it, everything in cubes, especially with wall ovens and stuff. And you can make them up any which way you like, really. So a lot of people might not have considered a compact. So what you did was have a compact up the top and a larger oven down the bottom. That was very, very common 7-8 years ago. A lot of people now are doing two larger ovens, so two 60 by 60 ovens. America, again, totally different. Like, it's just bigger the better. You're talking 76 centimetre, 90 centimetre ovens, big ovens. Whereas Europe, Australia, and Europe particularly is more into the compact oven, so the 45 centimetre, but having a lot of them. So you might have a compact combi steam, a compact combi microwave, a compact coffee machine, a compact regular pyrolytic oven. So you get this line of 45 centimetre ovens. So you might have 5 appliances all in a line, but they're quite small. So it varies. But
isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
it's really interesting, the dynamics of that, because the times I've been to Europe, most of the places that we go to are quite small, other than maybe Doug's family in Spain, which has quite a large house.
Yeah.
And Doug's uncle's wife hates cooking, so she's got the smallest oven in the world.
I mean, I'm generalising.
Everyone else is small, because the houses
are small.
Are quite, you've got to fit a lot in.
Yeah, I'm generalising a lot, but you don't often, like 60 centimetre ovens in Europe, and when I say Europe, Holland, Sweden, those sorts of countries which are smaller living spaces, you're more likely to see 2 smaller ovens rather than 1 big oven.
Okay.
Or 2 smaller appliances.
Well, I know how much we fit into our 45 centimetre oven, and how quickly it cooks relatively to the big 60 centimetre. And the only real time I take a preference over the 60 centimetre is because when Dougie and I went to Morocco, we bought a big tagine and had it shipped back.
Yeah.
And that just fits into the 60 centimetre oven.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, when you go to a demo, if you want to take in your tagine, do it. Like,
because you've got to make sure it fits, because this has like a millimetre at the top, but putting it in.
Yeah, and don't discount a smaller oven as well. Like, there's manufacturers do them. People, you don't have to buy a big single standalone cooktop. You can get things called dominoes, which are just a single unit. So you could dot them around your bench top. You could do anything. Like, manufacturers try and build as much possibility in for you. So you're not bound by just what's on the shelf. Like, go and have a look at that particular brand, and if they show you a combi steam oven but it's not what you're interested in, you should be able to get some insight into how an oven from that brand will work, because functionality across a lot of ovens will be similar, like not the same but similar, and you'll get to see results, because the cavity on the actual oven cavity on a 6 function oven versus a 15 function oven, the cavity itself will more likely than not be identical. So the cooking performance will more likely than not be identical. They might just add some more functionality in the 16 function oven versus the 5 or 6 function, but the cavity itself still give you an idea of performance. So have a look at those things and ask the demonstrator too. They should know.
Well, I think things have changed since I was first looking. When the first demonstration that Dougie and I went to, I think was pretty well scripted.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago, and the information just wasn't as available. The technology wasn't as known.
Yeah.
There wasn't the range and the variety that there is now. So,
but imagine the questions that you can ask now.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
you'll probably stump a few demonstrators there,
no,
I reckon.
Well, it's when you go and you know that sometimes what they say is wrong. Like when we've been to those ones and you put your hand up and you do feel a bit embarrassed saying actually.
Yeah.
But it's still worthwhile, and I think that's a really good point about taking in the things that matter to you.
Yeah.
If it matters to you to use your favourite crock pot or your favourite tagine or your favourite saucepan or something.
Does the oven have a grilling function?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's the main reason we got at the time the bottom oven was because it had a grill, and that's how we like to do. Yeah, we don't have a toaster, but I like the idea of the big pot. If that's the pot that you use for making your pasta and everything, your soups and everything in, and it matters to you, take it.
Yeah.
Don't be ashamed.
Yeah.
Drag it in. Ask. Yeah. It'll be really engaging for the demonstrator.
And you're really in control of how the demonstration goes. So, the demonstrator will have some idea of what they need to do and say from a cooking perspective, but you're in control of the way it goes, and get your questions answered, because that's the whole idea behind it, is that you address specific customer queries.
And I think that point too, one thing we always know is that if you've got a question and you don't ask it, there's probably 2 other people at the demonstration who've got the same question. So don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Well, thanks for that, Paul.
No worries.
Okay, see you everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thanks for listening to this podcast as we explore home cooking in a modern world. We'd love you to subscribe, and for more information, please go to our website, cookingwithsteam.com.